Hello, you are listening to NPE Stories. This is a podcast where NPEs can share their story. I am your host, Lily, and I found out I was an NPE through an ancestry DNA test that changed my life forever. NPE is a term that stands for Not Parent Expected or Non-Paternal Event. This means that one or more of our parents are not who we believe them to be. NPE Stories is a podcast where NPEs can share their story of what their original family was like, how they found out they were an NPE, and what their journey has been like since the day they found out. And welcome to episode 145. And today I am honored that I get to speak with Traci. Hi, Traci.
Hello.
Thank you so much for doing this with me today.
Oh, well, thank you for this. I have to tell you that your podcast has been very helpful and healing for my process, and just hearing other people's stories has just been healing for me, and it's just brought me peace knowing that I'm not alone.
Mm-hmm. I'm so glad to hear that. That's what I need to listen to these too. They help me so much. And you are going to share with us your NPE story today. I purposely didn't look at too much of your background. I just like to go in kind of cold so I can be fully present and listen. So if you would start at the beginning, give me a little bit of your family of origin, your background story, and we can take it from there.
Okay. I'm actually in a good place right now, so hopefully my emotions stay intact, but so all should be good. But it all started out, my parents dated in high school. They were married in May of 68. Then I believe early 69, my dad was drafted into the Army. And then on their first year anniversary, I was told this is where I was conceived, and I had always remembered the story that Mom flew to Hawaii to meet my dad on military R&R, and that's where I was conceived. But I've later found out my dad was on military R&R, but he had just finished his basic training in Georgia, and she either flew down there to meet with him for the R&R, or he came home for R&R before he was shipped out to Vietnam. And anyway, that's where I was supposedly conceived, and all that is the story I've been told. And I was born, let's say, probably about 6 months, when my mom was 6 months pregnant with me. He did receive a military R&R from Vietnam, and they both met in Hawaii and spent a few days there. And then 3 months later, I was born. And I was the only child for about 4 years until my sister was born in 74. And we had a normal childhood, nothing out of the ordinary. We were well provided for, never went without. We lived in a strict, disciplined Southern home where we were taught Southern etiquette, and we were told, to use sir and ma'am anytime we addressed adults, and we were seen, not heard, and just I want to say it's your typical Southern family, because I know a few of my friends, they lived in kind of the same type of situation, but I think it was just that kind of that day and age as well. But so anyway, my sister and I, we fought a lot growing up, just your typical civil rivalry, but we love each other. We're totally opposites. She is 5'5", brown hair, blue eyes, slim built, extrovert, just very caring and loving person. And I am like 5'4", dark blonde, greenish blue eyes, I'm an introvert, so we are totally opposites. But I'm more of an athletic built and curvy. So, I mean, even our body builds are the same. And it never really, I knew that we looked different, but we still had some similarities. And where she looked more like my dad, I looked more like my mom. Nothing ever, seemed unusual to me because, I just figured it was the luck of the draw, how the genes work. She got mostly dad's genes. I got mostly mom's genes. But so that's how that all worked out. And my dad, he's a pretty quiet, keep to yourself kind of person. He's a no nonsense guy. He's your kind of like good old country boy, tough, strong, invincible type of guy, and just really down to earth. He's a jokester. He just, I think my sister said it once, we just put him on a pedestal. He's just like, could do no wrong. And even if he did do no wrong, we're like, who cares? You're our dad kind of thing. And our mom, she is, she's kind of a little bit of both worlds. She has some narcissistic traits. She could be manipulative, self-centered, controlling, passive aggressive. But in the same sense, she's like polar opposite, and she can be the most loving, gentle, kind, and compassionate woman you'll ever meet. Our dad kind of worked out of town a lot. He's a construction worker. Our mom, she had a hair salon there on the side of our house. So we saw dad on the weekends. Our parents' relationship was kind of toxic majority of the time. I mean, we had our good moments, and they had their good moments, and we had some good, memorable family time. But there was also a lot of contention in the home. And I think I was about 12. I was either like 12 or 14 years old, somewhere in that range. I can't remember. When my mom decided to tell me at some point that her and my dad had received a divorce. I think she said I was about, I think I was a little over a year old. Because I didn't see my dad return from Vietnam in 70. I was about 7 or 8 months old. And once he returned from Vietnam, Mom said the war changed him. He just wasn't the same person. And they just didn't get along, and they ended up getting a divorce. And Mom ended up meeting this other gentleman. His name is Sam. And they dated a little bit and then married in December of 71, I believe. And she said that she was with him for like maybe 2 weeks and ended up leaving him and going back to my dad because she couldn't bear keeping me from him. And she really realized that he was the man she wanted to be with. So she ended up divorcing Sam in February of 72 and remarried my dad. And they were married, I don't know, I think 25 years or so. They ended up getting divorced in 93. I was pregnant with my first child. And anyway, but their relationship was not very good. She kind of did her own thing. He did his own thing. We would go on family vacations occasionally, more so without my dad than with him. I could probably count on one hand how many times he went with us. But Mom was the type of person who was just like, well, I'm going and I'm taking the girls. If you want to go, you can go. But, we're going with or without you kind of thing. So she kind of did her own thing. And plus, my dad's the type of person who doesn't like to take off work. He just never missed work. So between the combination between not getting along with my mom and not wanting to miss work to go on vacations, he just never attended vacations with us. And not that we went on a ton, but when we did go on some, he was not present. But we had a good childhood. We knew my dad's siblings and their children, and we knew my mom's siblings and or my mom's brother. I guess she only has the one, and then his kids. And so we were close with our first cousins and on both sides, and we were close to my maternal grandmother's family. So we knew them quite a bit. But on my dad's side, we knew of them, but we weren't that close with them. It was never shy of hugs and kisses when you went to a family reunion or a family gathering or whatever, and you're smothered with hugs and kisses. That was just a typical. And if you wanted to say goodbye, you needed to plan like 30 minutes in advance because it took you that long just to go through the goodbyes and everything. It was. We had a great childhood. I will say that. I mean, everybody has their ups and downs, but for the most part, we had a good childhood. Anyway, after my mom had told me about Sam, and I just thought it was weird that she would tell me about this, and I think I eventually ended up telling my sister when she was old enough to understand. And like I said, we're about 4 years apart. And so given that, at the time, Mom never told me any specific dates. She had just told me, when you're about 1, I married him and for about a couple of weeks. And then, I ended up divorcing him or getting an annulment and then remarrying your dad. But she never really said any dates. So being the mean sister that I used to always tease my sister that she was Sam's kid because we never really had a timeline. And even though I knew it wasn't true, I just did it to push her buttons. And, and look back now, I've told her, I said, oh my gosh, I am so sorry. Like that was the worst thing I could have done. And she's like, you need to relax, but yeah, so what I didn't know was that my constant teasing that Sam was her dad planted a seed in her, because then she began to question that and starting to believe it. It just, and I never knew that until recently. Probably about, I don't know, 6 months ago, I think is when she finally confided in me that, that planted a seed. And now I look back and I feel so bad for teasing her about that. But the relationship I have with my mom has always been strained. I love my mom. Don't get me wrong. I absolutely love my mom. She did the best she could by us, and she was a good mom for the most part. And like I said, everybody has their ups and downs, but I'm in a good place right now. So I really love my mom. So I just kind of want to focus on the positive. But no, our relationship has always been strained, and we always walked on eggshells throughout our entire lives. Happy mom, happy life kind of thing. And if we crossed her or if we questioned anything, she'd get mad at us and wouldn't talk to us for days or weeks on end. Like currently, she hasn't spoke to me since Labor Day because of a little argument we kind of had. But anyway, so that's the kind of person she is. I mean, if you kind of cross her, challenge her, whatever, she'll just cut you off and won't talk to you. And, and then she'll just she'll come around. She'll either, not really that she forgets about it, but she comes around and starts talking to us again. But fast forward to 2019, I believe it was, my sister calls me one day and she says, my sister, she has a side job on top of her other job. I mean, she is like busy almost 24/7. I don't know how she burns the candle at both ends, but she was cleaning one of our cousins' house, and they were talking, and my cousins, so this would be my first cousin once removed. She is my maternal grandmother's sister's daughter. I think I said that right. Yeah. She was her mom and my maternal grandmother. So their sisters worked together. There's actually 3 sisters that worked together at this factory. And my mother had also worked there at one point in her life before she got a career. And that's where she had actually met Sam. So my cousin had called my sister and was telling her about these stories about when my mom used to work at this factory with my aunts. So they would be I guess you would say my grand aunts or great aunts. I don't know how you would say that because they were my maternal grandmother's sisters. And so anyway, my mom had worked with them and she attended parties with my aunt. So there would be parties. I'm assuming it's coworkers within this plant, and they would just have parties or whatever. And things would happen. There was drinking and partying and everything else going on. And so my sister then started thinking, "Oh my goodness, this is probably how I was probably conceived," because we couldn't really pinpoint when my mom was with Sam, when she had married Sam and then ended up divorcing. We couldn't quite pinpoint it because Mom didn't really give us dates, and if she did, it didn't register. Somehow my sister got this idea, and plus with me teasing her, she had this idea that, oh my gosh, maybe Sam is my dad. So in 2019, she calls me and she's telling me this, and I'm like, you're crazy. I'm like, I was just telling you that stuff just to be mean. I was being a mean sister. I said, there is no way. I said, you look 100% like our dad and his sister. And she's like, no, I look nothing like that side of the family. I'm like, you look more like it than you believe. And I said, yeah, you resemble more of our mother's side, because as we both have gotten older, we both resemble more of our mother's side than our father's side. And anyway, it just put lots of doubts in her mind. And she says, I really want to take a DNA test. Would you be willing to take one with me? And I'm very heavily involved in genealogy. I absolutely love genealogy because knowing my family history gives me like a sense of identity, a sense of belonging, where I came from. And I thrived on that and knowing the history and everything. And I don't know like stories, but I know like areas where we're from and places that were named after our family. And it just fascinated me. I've always just been fascinated with genealogy. And so anyway, I was just like, I don't really need to know. I really don't need this DNA test because I know where we're from. I don't need that. And she's like, but I need some peace of mind knowing that, just to eliminate Sam and to know that dad is my dad. And so for her, I decided to do it because I was like, okay, to give you a peace of mind, I will do this for you. So I ordered my DNA test, took the test. I think it was like, I don't know, how long does it take? 6 weeks? I can't remember. It's been so long before I got my results. And I had totally forgot about it because my husband and I were heavily involved with the youth at this time in our lives. And so it consumed our lives. And so that was not an issue. And plus, I think around that same time, our dad was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease at the time too. So that was weighing on my mind as well. So when I finally received my results, I was like, oh, okay, I'll open this up. I opened it up. I saw relatives, what I thought from both sides of my family, because I saw both surnames. And I recognized a few of them. Some I didn't, and I just chalked it up to, distant cousins. I didn't know who they were. And one of them was actually a first cousin, and I didn't understand who that was because I knew all my first cousins. And I thought, well, maybe it's just someone using, initials or something, didn't want to be identified. And because I've seen that happen before. And so I called my sister and I said, hey, I got my results. Looks like everything's normal on my end. I said, did you get your results? And she says, I chickened out. She goes, I couldn't do it. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I think I called her a few choice names and and she was like, I can't bring myself to do it. And I said, look, you better take that damn test because I did this for you and I didn't really need to do it. And she's like, okay. So she ended up doing it. When she got her results back, same thing, nothing out of the ordinary. She saw both surnames. She recognized a few people, and we didn't know what we were looking at. We, compared, I don't even remember what we compared, but it showed that we were close related, or I can't even remember now what it said. But anyway, it didn't raise any red flags. And like I said, we didn't know what we were ignorant to the results. We had no idea what centimorgans or anything like that was. We didn't know anything like that. So we were satisfied with our findings and it was never discussed again. Well, off and on, I would kind of go back on to Ancestry DNA and check my results, and nothing, like I said, nothing was ever out of the ordinary for me. I mean, other than, there were people on there that I didn't know, but I just figured, they were distant relatives. And so this went on probably about a couple of years. And then August 22nd, 2021, I'm sitting in church and I'm sitting there during sacrament, and all of a sudden I get this intuition to open up the app again and just kind of review things. And I'm like, okay, I should be paying attention, but of course I'm not. So I open up my app and all of a sudden, I don't know what made me think, but I checked my relationship with my sister, and it said that we were first cousins. And I'm like, what? So I go in, I try to change the relationship, and it wouldn't let me. I think it gives you like first cousin, aunt, uncle, grandparent, and half sibling. I think it's what it said. And I'm like, it is none of these. I don't know what's going on. So I screenshot it, text it to my sister, and while I'm waiting for her to respond, I show my husband and my daughter at the time, who was living with us. shrugging my shoulders because we're still in church and can't really talk. And I'm like, I don't know what this is. And they were kind of confused by it. And so then I get, my sister responds and says, well, that's weird. And she had already canceled her subscription with Ancestry, so she couldn't go back in and look at everything. So she was just relying on my information. And then we noticed these centimorgans in that we only shared 24% DNA, I believe is what it was. And I'm like, I don't know what that means. And so I don't think she did either. If I remember correctly, she Googled it and she screenshotted it and sent it back to me. And it said that full siblings share 50% DNA and half siblings share 24% DNA. And it still wasn't registering in my mind. I mean, I was just like going, I don't know if I was just in denial or if it was because I was in a public area and I just didn't want to react, but it just wasn't, my mind was racing, but I just didn't respond. I don't know. I can't even explain it. It just wasn't registering. And so we talked back and forth throughout church. And finally, when I got home, we called each other and we were talking. And then she was like, oh my gosh, my worst nightmare is coming true. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe it's not you. Maybe it's me. And she's like, well, I guess that could be a possibility. Maybe we just have the timeline wrong. And anyway, so we're talking back and forth, trying to figure this out. And she's like, well, we got to confront mom about this. And I said, it can't be me. I said, because for one, I don't think I could talk to her right now without being calm. And I said, and for another, you have a better relationship with you. And when I talk to her, she gets defensive. My sister and I can give her the same advice or say the same exact thing, and she would get offended if I said it. But then when my sister said it, she'd be like, oh my gosh, that is the greatest thing I've ever heard. So that is how our relationship is. And so I told her, I said, I can't be the one to approach her because she will get defensive. And she says, I will do it. She goes, but it has to be over the phone. It can't be a text. And I said, I totally agree, because this is something you don't want to be texting about. So she's like, when does she get home from church? And I said, and I couldn't remember. I think it was, I don't know, 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I can't remember. I think it's when her church was over with. And she's like, okay, I'll call her on her way home from church. And I said, okay. I received this group text from my sister that's addressed to my mom and myself. And it says, what the hell, Mom? Do you have something you want to tell us? And she sends her all these screenshots that we have been sharing with each other all morning. And she says, why does this show my sister and I only being half siblings? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe you just text all this. You were supposed to call, not text. So I ended up calling my sister. And I'm like, what are you doing? Or maybe I sent her a text. I can't remember. And I'm like, what are you doing? She goes, I couldn't handle it anymore. I couldn't wait. She goes, so I just sent a text. And she says, so hopefully when she gets out of church, she'll read it and she'll call us back. And I'm like, okay. It just didn't seem real. And so I think, and again, my timeline is off. I can't remember after she sent that text. I can't remember how much longer until our mom responded, but she sent a text to both of us of the laughing emoji.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And I'm like, this is not a laugh. By this time, I was furious. And I was like, this is not a laughing matter. And I text my sister and I'm like, she's got to do better than that. This is not a laughing matter. And so my sister responds back and she says, Mom, this is not funny. We are being for real. What is going on? And nothing again. I bet you, I'm pretty sure it was probably about an hour before I heard anything. And my sister calls me. And well, by this time, I was just like, screw it. I'm going to go take a nap because I was so tired and I was starting to get emotionally drained. And I just had laid down on the couch and I get a call from my sister. And she calls and she says, Traci. And at that moment, she didn't have to say another word because I could hear the distraught in her voice. And I said, it's me, isn't it? And she goes, yeah, it's you. And Sam is your dad. And so by this time, I'm like so confused because I'm like going, I was just a little kid when they married. And it just, nothing was adding up or anything. And I just remember that moment. I just cried. And my daughter was sitting on the couch and she immediately came over and sat by me. And then she called up to my dad, she called up to my husband and told him to come down. And she was explaining what just went down. And then my daughter got on the phone with my oldest daughter and told her, and she immediately stopped what she was doing and rushed over as well. So I had all three of them there just around me, consoling me. And while I'm just sitting here bawling and talking to my sister and just trying to wrap my head around it all. And and then after I got off the phone with her, she's like, before I got off the phone with her, my sister said, I'm on my way out to Mom's. She wants to talk to you. I'm going out there for moral support. And because she doesn't want to be alone when she tells you. And I said, okay. And both of our parents have since remarried. They both have remarried other people years ago, and we absolutely adore our step parents. And my stepdad, just to kind of back up a little bit, my stepdad, when my sister had sent that text and Mom was laughing at it, I guess, and my stepdad had said, is there any way that could be true? And she had to stop and think, and she was like, oh my gosh, I guess it is. And so both of our step parents have been great through all this. But anyway, she needed my sister out there for moral support before she called me. And she says, as soon as I get out there, we'll give you a call. She had told me also that the reason why it took Mom so long to respond after she sent the laughing emoji was because she decided that she needed to lie down and take a nap or something another to, I guess it was too much for her or something. I don't know. So that's what took her so long, because she had to take a little nap and gather her thoughts and before she called my sister. And when she had called my sister, she was like, so what do you need? What's going on? I mean, she was kind of acting like nothing was going on. And that's when my sister was like, hey, look, we got these results. Just tell us what's going on. And that's when she had spoke to my sister for a while. And then my sister called me and was heading out to Mom so that she could call me. So anyway, during that whole process of while I was waiting for her to get out to our mom's house, I was just like, I can't even explain. I can't even explain the feeling. I was experiencing at that moment, because I had based my entire life, my entire identity on this genealogy. And now all of a sudden, I had no clue who I was. I mean, I know I was the same person, but as far as my heritage, I had no idea where I was coming from. No idea. And I just felt lost. And my main thought was that my dad was not my dad anymore. And I absolutely adore that man. And I could not fathom the thought that he just was not blood related to me anymore. And my girls and my husband were trying to console me, and they were trying to say the right things, that, your dad's still your dad, and, you'll always be a part of that family. And I understand, I appreciate it, what they were saying, but they didn't know exactly what I was feeling. And I just all of a sudden felt cut off, I guess. I don't know what other better way to explain it, but it was just like this, I don't know, the weirdest, I just can't put it into words what I was feeling, but it was just like this outer body experience that, it's just so surreal, I guess, or I don't know, it just wasn't something that I was expecting. I just felt lost, and I was hurt, so hurt. And anyway, I ended up, after I settled down for a little bit, I still was shedding tears off and on until my mom finally called me. And she called me and she immediately apologized, which is very unusual for her. But she immediately apologized and said she was so sorry and she never meant to hurt me. And I can't remember everything she said, but I do remember being very calm. And I told her, I said, Mom, I don't care how this all went down. I don't care. I said, because I understand that time of age, or that day and age, things were different. And I said, and I know it was probably scary. Dad was off to war. Here you are pregnant and you didn't want to be a single mom. You didn't want to lose everything. I said, I get that. And I don't care how it all came about. I don't care. I said, what I care about the most is that why you never told me. She said she didn't know. But as we got to talking, it wasn't that she didn't know. It's just that she didn't have solid proof. She's had her doubts my entire life. And she's even confided in one or two people. And they told her, she is definitely your husband's daughter. No doubt about it. Always will be. Always is and always will be. I don't know if she never even thought about it more after that, or she just it just stayed in the back of her mind. But I think it became her truth. My dad was my dad. And so that's what she never told me. And I told her, I said, okay. She says, and if I would had said anything, she says, I would have lost everything. And she says, and then I wouldn't have your sister. And I said, well, I understand that. I said, but you divorced Dad in 93. You didn't have anything else to lose. So why didn't you tell me then? I said, because I would have much rather have heard it from you than some damn DNA test. It would have meant more to me. She never answered. She got quiet after that. And to be honest, I don't even remember what all of our conversation was. It's been so long. Well, I say so long. It's only been over a year. But it's just, like I said, it's just all of that day is just a blur to me. And I do remember asking her the story. And the story is when Mom and Dad were married that first year, and she said it was a rough year. And she says they fought a lot and separated off and on. And then he was drafted into the Army, and he would write her and say, I'm going to be a changed man. I'm going to be better. I'm going to take care of you. But it was during that time that she ended up having an affair with Sam. And 3 weeks before their first year anniversary, when they met after Dad's basic training, she broke it off with Sam. Well, she didn't realize she was pregnant at the time. And so when she met up with my dad on their first year anniversary, and shortly after that, she realized she was pregnant. And my grandmother even questioned her, whose baby is it? And Mom said she didn't know. She says, I don't know. She says, but when I was born 9 months later, she says, nothing was ever said again. She just put my dad as my birth certificate dad, and he was my dad. Never said anything else again. It's been a hard year. I did not take any time off, which was a mistake. I had recently been promoted to CFO of this company, and I was allowing things to fall through the crack, and I was making big mistakes. And because I just couldn't focus, because this was consuming my thoughts 24/7, and I was not thinking rational about anything. And I was just going through the motions day in, day out. And I'd find myself crying throughout the day. I'd have to shut my office door so that nobody would walk in, and trying to be discreet so that no one would come and say anything to me, or notice. And because I'm not one to bring attention to myself. So I was trying to be discreet. I wasn't eating. I wasn't sleeping. It just consumed my thoughts. I mean, I would be getting ready for work in the mornings, and then I would just start crying and walk into my husband's bathroom and just hug him and just cry and just ask him to just hold me. I just had the hardest time comprehending everything, and it was overwhelming, and I just couldn't function. And it was not only affecting me mentally, but it was affecting me physically too. And because when I stress, I carry it all in my shoulder and my back. And so I had to end up going to like the spine neck doctor. I don't remember what they're called, but anyway, I went to this spine and neck doctor, and they subscribed physical therapy for me, and I had to go through all these physical therapy sessions and dry needling and trying to, take care of myself. And I just didn't know how to do that. My family was trying to help me, and I just shut everybody off. I just shut everybody off because I'm like my dad in that aspect. I'm pretty independent, and I think I can resolve everything on my own. And I just shut off when something's bothering me. I just shut down, and I don't let anyone in, and I stay guarded. And I did not seek any therapy. I tried looking for it. I couldn't find anything in my area that specialized in this. And that was another thing. Let me kind of back up. After, the first day that I discovered all this, my sister and we immediately started searching for Sam, and including my daughters. So all of us were being detectives. And that was one thing I will say that my mom, she says, I will help you find him. I will help you do whatever. She had told me that when her and dad first divorced in 93, that she ended up having a dinner with Sam, which I later discovered my sister actually set up, because my sister started working at the same plant that Sam worked at and that my mom used to work at. And so my sister started working there and introduced herself to him. And she ended up setting up like a little date with my mom and Sam before my mom moved to Houston after she divorced. And mom had told me that she had a dinner with him, and she says that she mentioned that I could possibly be his. And he said that, she said that he said, well, no sense in disrupting everybody's lives or something like that. Which, when she told me that story, just killed me. It just hurt my feelings, because I was like going, how can you say that? I'm your blood. How can you just like dismiss me like I was nothing, But I'm hearing his version of that story, and it's totally opposite. And I will get to that later. But so anyway, she told me that during this dinner that he does have 2 sons. So I do have 2 brothers out there. And she says, I will help you find him. And my sister and my daughter said the same thing. We'll help you find him. But there was nobody wanted, my sister and my mom did not want me to reach out to him. I immediately was so overwhelmed that I think I went on to Ancestry DNA, and I think I reached out to a couple of relatives, like first cousins and stuff, that I had no clue who they were. I reached out to them and said, hey, look, how are we related? Of course, I got no response, but I just reacted. Instead of thinking about it, I just reacted and started just reaching out to a couple of people, and I got no response. We researched the internet, and by the end of the night, we knew Sam. We knew where he lived. We knew his phone number. We knew my 2 brothers, where they lived and their phone numbers. It is so scary what you can find on the internet these days. And so we had all of that. I knew my brother's mother, and not know him, but we found their mother. We found him on social media. We found all this stuff, and I had the desire to reach out to Sam. And I said, because he has the right to know. And I immediately had the mindset that I am the victim in all this, and Sam's a victim in all this, and my dad's a victim of all this. And I asked mom if dad even knew, and she says, no, he has no clue. And she says, and you can't tell Sam, you can't reach out to him. And both my sister and my mom did not want me to reach out to Sam because they said, if you tell Sam, then you will have to tell Dad, and you can't tell Dad because that will just break his heart. And so they put me on this guilt trip, and I abided by their wishes, and I said, okay, I won't reach out. And we left it at that, but I still needed answers. And so I went on the internet and I started Googling. I didn't even know what I was Googling, but I ended up coming across, I believe, your podcast. And I binged listened to that for days until I got caught up to the current episode at the time. And I mean, it was all I listened to. I listened to it in the morning. I listened to it at work all day long. I come home, I had my ear pods in and I'd listen to it. And what's so cool is that my sister also listened to all this, and it helped her to understand what I was going through. And because she's told me, she says, you shouldn't be going through this alone. She says, I got you in this mess. I'm going to get you through this mess. And so she has been my rock. She has been my ride or die. She's funny because when we found out that it was Sam and we found his address, oh, that girl, she's crazy. She drove out to his place and videoed it as, did like a little drive-by. She's like, this is where he lives, and because and to be clear, I live 2,000 miles away. Mm-hmm. So my sister still lives in the South. I'm living out Midwest or the West, I guess, whatever. Anyway, and so I'm very disconnected in that aspect as well. And so, like, I just can't jump in my car and drive over there or whatnot. I am like 2,000 miles away. So anyway, she was doing all my dirty work. She was driving by, trying to figure out where he lived. And I made this pact with my mom and sister that I would not say anything. And also, my youngest daughter was to be married in January. And everybody was flying out here for the wedding. And I did not need any extra drama that day because I wanted it to be her day, her special day. And so I was like, okay, I'll keep this under wraps until after you're married. And then I'll reach out to Sam and then tell my dad. Because I didn't feel like if I reached out to Sam, I felt like I had to tell my dad. Because they live in a town where everybody's all up in everybody's business. It's not a small town by any means, but it's not a huge town either. I mean, it's about average. I think there's maybe, 60, 70,000 people that live there. So there's a lot of people that are in the same rings of different friends. So I mean, sooner or later, someone knows something about somebody because word travels fast. But I told Mom, I said, you are not allowed to say anything to Dad during the wedding. I said, I want zero drama. I said, this is my daughter's day and she'll have a perfect day. So you cannot say a word. I said, no matter how much you're feeling guilty or whatever, you can't say anything. I ended up figuring out his birthday was in October, and I really wanted to reach out and say, surprise, it's a girl or something, something to that effect, and send him a birthday card. But I decided against it because that's when I came across, because I was still doing a lot of research on Google about all of this, and because I had no clue I was part of a statistic, so to speak, and that I was a MPE. And so I was researching all this, and I think that's when I came across, I think it was called MPE Guide. I think, is that the one Gina Daniels is?
Oh, MPE, yes. She's one of the writers at NPE Guide, the blog.
Yeah. So I came across that. And I think one of the first things I clicked on her website was don't react. Stop, give it some time. It's been there forever. It's going to continue to be there. Just stop, gather your thoughts, and, think things through first before you reach out and before you react. And so I did that. I took her advice on that, and I actually love that website. I've used it many times, and as a matter of fact, whenever I listened to her podcast that you had done with her, I got a few ideas that she had mentioned that I have also done. So I just love her website. So anyway, I put on the brakes. I didn't reach out, but it just kept, I just felt stuck. I couldn't heal. I wasn't moving forward. I don't know any other way to say it, but other than I just felt stuck. And during this time, I realized my mom was having a hard time as well with all this. I do not dismiss that at all, because I know that's got to be devastating on her end. And she didn't want to tell anybody because she didn't want her reputation ruined, because she is a faithful church goer. And she said if her church family finds out, then she would be the talk of the church, and she would be judged and all this. And I remember telling her, if that was 52 years ago, or I guess at the time 51, I said that was 51 years ago. If they're going to judge you for something that happened 51 years ago, then shame on them. I said, everyone sins, just everyone sins differently. I said, so they have no right to judge you. And I said, and like I said, that was years ago. They have no right to judge you. And of course, mom being, she thrives on drama. And so she has been very dramatic about all of this. And I've tried to be nice. I've tried to handle this with class and tried to be classy about it, and just because I don't want to tarnish our relationship more than what it already is or was. And so I was always, I guess, still walking on pins and needles like I have my entire life. And instead of voicing my own thoughts and opinions, so I was just trying to be careful around her and just, make sure she's taken care of, and through all this. And so she would tell us that she was having a hard time, and, she went down a dark path and even thought about suicide and all this stuff, and which really made me angry, because suicide is not anything to be taken lightly at all. And so that really just made me mad, because I thought it was a very selfish act, or thought, I should say, because she would never react on it. And it hasn't been her first time that she has made a comment like this throughout our lives. And it's not like she does it on a regular basis. So it's not like it's common, but it just rubbed me the wrong way. And I remember telling her that I said, Mom, you're not the victim here. And because I remember her saying, we'll all get through this. It's been a hard time for all of us, and we'll get through this because we love each other. And the way she implied her text when she was texting my sister and I was that, or the way I took it, I guess I should say, is that she was the victim and that we'll all work through this and kind of thing. And it just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And that wasn't the first time that she had said this. Because I remember when shortly after I first found this out, it was as if nothing ever happened. And she started sending jokes and screenshots of funny memes. And I mean, it just seemed like she was being very inconsiderate to what I was going through and just dismissing it. And she wouldn't ever ask me how I was doing, how can I help you? I mean, she had offered to help find Sam and all that, but she never really asked how I was doing and how she can help me get through this. And like I said, I understand that she had her own issues as well, and that this is not the easiest thing on her side as well. But I don't know, she just seemed to have the way to turn this whole situation about her, make it about her, and it just would rub me the wrong way. And sometimes I would snap at her, but then I'd feel guilty, and then I would say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. I'm just trying to deal through my emotions, and I can't deal with yours at the same time. And so it just, I don't know, it's very dramatic between us the past, that first, I don't know, 2 or 3 months with everything. And my sister just kept giving me kudos, saying, you're handling it a lot better than I would. I would have already gone postal on her and everything. And, but, and I was actually surprised myself because I can be quick to anger at times. And so I was really surprised at myself when, I would be so calm and patient with her and things that she would say to us about this situation and how she would just make it about her and everything. And it just would just drive me crazy. But probably around Thanksgiving last year, I just had a feeling that I needed to reach out to Sam now. I can't wait. I'll reach out to Sam, and if he accepts me, then I'll eventually tell my dad. But if he rejects me, then I'm not saying anything to my dad at all. And it's like no sense in hurting him if, if Sam wants nothing to do with me. And so I told my girls, and of course my youngest was nervous because she's like, oh my goodness, is that going to cause drama between your mom and dad at the wedding? And I'm like, no, he'll be good. I promise. I said, it'll be all good. And so she's like, okay, you have my full support, Mom. I trust you, and then my sister and my mom both, well, not my mom, my sister. I told my sister, I said, I have to reach out. I can't do this anymore. I feel stuck, and I think I'm ready to reach out. I just I need to, for a peace of mind, I need to reach out. And and her fiance had been speaking with her about all this, and he had told her that I would not truly heal until I reached out to Sam and resolved that issue. And so that gave my sister a change of heart. And she said, I totally am supportive of you. She says, whatever you decide, she goes, this is your story. I don't want to be influenced on any of your decisions. You make the decision and I will support whatever you decide. and which I truly appreciated, because that was one reason why I never reached out, was because I didn't want to disappoint her and break my promise I had given her about not reaching out. And plus, I did not want to hurt my mom, because I knew with them all being in the same town, I knew I was risking her, because she didn't want anyone to know about that. And then I knew I was risking my dad finding out if I reached out to Sam, and I didn't want him finding out before I had a chance to tell him. And so it was just really a risky situation, but I took it. So I think it was that first part of December, I ended up writing a letter, and I used the template that I believe Gina Daniels put on her website, and I tweaked it, to more personalize it towards me, and took some of it out and stuff. But I used that template, and I wrote a letter to Sam, and I pretty much said, hey, I believe you're my bio father, and this is why. This is my mother. This is when I was born. This is the story. Or I don't think I told him the story. I just said, my mom says she knew you at this time. And then I told him how I found out that, I had a test in 2019 and didn't really discover what we were looking at until August of 2021. And I said, I know that was 4 months ago, but it's taken me this long to process it. And I said, I don't want anything from you. All I want is medical history, because I do not know that. And I said, and I also want to know my grandparents. I said, I loved my grandparents when they were alive. They were so involved in our lives, both my dad and my mom's side. And I said, I just love grandparents. I said, so I know that your parents, which are my grandparents, aren't alive anymore, but I would like to have pictures and, maybe some stories. And I said, that's all I'm asking for. And I said, I would love to have a relationship with you. I said, but if you aren't comfortable with that, I said, I will totally respect that. And I said, but I will tell you this. And I kind of gave him, I said, I am married. I have 2 daughters. And I gave their ages. And I said, we would love to get to know you, but we will also respect your privacy if that's what you decide. And I can't remember everything I wrote in that letter, but that was kind of the gist of it. And I gave him my, I think I gave him my address and my phone number. And I didn't even think about putting in my Gmail, my email. And I put it in a next day air envelope. My husband said, I will take care of it, and I will keep track of the tracking. Otherwise, you will be looking at that thing every day. And I'm like, okay. So he took care of it. He mailed it, I think, on a Thursday. And then, of course, it arrived Friday. We got confirmation from it, and nothing. And I remember my sister and I anxiously waiting for the package to arrive, and she's like, has it gotten there yet? Has it gotten there yet? Or I said, I don't know. I said, my husband won't even tell me. That's what it was. And finally, I think later on that afternoon, I said, dude, it's got to be there. You got to tell me. Has it arrived? And so my husband looks and he goes, yes, it arrived. Leave me alone already. And so I told my sister, anyway, like I said, nothing. I got no word the next day, No word the next day. And of course, by this time it was the weekend. And come Monday, no word still. And my sister, I was just like, and I was talking to my husband too. I said, well, it took me 4 months to process. I said, so, it's going to take him some time to process too, I guess. And I just kept trying to stay positive. But in the back of my mind, I know most of your people you've had on your podcast have just not had a good experience. And so I just was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be rejected. I'm going to be so sad if that's what happens. But I'll get through it, and so I remember talking to my sister, and if he decides to reject you, she says, he's just being dumb. She says, don't read anything into it. She says, you'll get through this. And it kind of relieved the moment because I was really feeling pressured and feel like, I couldn't breathe. And because I wanted to just have a panic attack and just break down. But I just had to stay positive and keep telling myself, he's just processing it. And a couple more days went by and still I haven't heard from him. And I'm just like, I just don't understand, because I try to put myself in that situation and I don't know what it's like to be on that on that end. I don't, but I was trying to figure out, if someone approached me and said I had a daughter or a son, I would want to be a part of their life. But that's me. I don't know what he would think. And I'd heard stories from Mom that he was a kind and gentle man and easygoing. And so I was hearing all these good things about him. So I couldn't comprehend why he just wouldn't respond. But he's also a very quiet man. And I'm starting to see that I'm more like him. So then I believe it had been maybe a week. I think it had been exactly a week. I was talking to my husband and I was telling him I had already memorized Sam's phone number. And all of a sudden, on my caller ID comes up with his area code and number. And I told my husband, I said, oh my gosh, I think Sam's calling me. I gotta let you go. And before he could say bye, I love you, whatnot, I just hung up on him. And I answered and I'm like, hello? And it was Sam. And I remember hurry up and getting in the parking lot and just putting in park. And we sat there and we talked for, I don't know, maybe an hour, hour and a half. And we laughed and we cried and we laughed and we cried. And he told me that he wanted to be a part of my life and that he wished I would have found this out sooner. He says, but, this late in the game, he says, we'll make the most of our time, but I want to be involved in your life. And I said, awesome, this is great. And to this day, he has texted me every day. He texts me every day to see how I'm doing, wish me good morning. He calls me about sometimes once a week, sometimes twice, depending on how much he's missing me or how lonely he is. Sometimes it's 2 or 3, 4 days in a row, but he's very, he tries to stay very involved in my life, and he will text my girls on occasion and talk to them. And anyway, it's just been really good. But then I found out, like, when I got home, or as soon as I got off the phone with him after he called me, and I called my husband and I told him, and I told him what we were talking about and stuff. And then after I got off the phone with him, I called my sister and talked to her. And after I talked to her, I just sent a quick text to my mom. And I said, just so you know, I have written Sam, and he has since reached out. And all of a sudden she calls me and we're talking, and she's like, "You wrote him a letter?" I'm like, "Yes." She goes, "Well, why didn't you tell me?" And I said, "Well, because I wanted this to be my thing. I didn't want to involve you. I just wanted this to be my thing." She goes, "Well, did you tell him that I have since remarried and where I lived?" And I mean, just all this stuff about her. And I'm like, no. I said, "All he knows is that you're my mom." I said, "He doesn't need to know that you're remarried and you're living, here and blah, blah, blah." And so she's like, "Well, what'd he say?" And I said, "Well, interesting that you asked that." I said, "Because he did bring up that time that you and he had dinner, or you and him had dinner, before you went to Houston." I said, and he said, I said, "I never said that I already knew about the dinner." I said, "I just listened to him, but he told me that you never mentioned me at that dinner." I said, "And I thought you said you had." And she said, "Well, maybe I didn't come right out and say it, because the way Sam stated, he said that she talked about me, but never implied that he could possibly be the father. She just said how special I was to her, and if anything ever happened to me, she wouldn't know what she would do, and had also invited him to go to Houston with her. And he said he couldn't because he's got family and stuff, there. He couldn't move there. And then he told me, he says, "But if I would have known at that time," he goes, "I would have gone." And he said, "And made it work just for you." And I said, "No, no, 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 no. No sense in putting yourself through that misery." I said, "Things happen for a reason." I said, so anyway, Mom never really answered that question. But so after I got off the phone with her, like I said, I've spoken with Sam every day. And I think at the end of December, and I told him, "I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings." I said, "But I have a dad." I said, "I have a dad. He's a good man. He raised me, and I will call him Dad." And I said, "And I hope you can understand and respect that." And he says, "Absolutely." He says, "He is your dad, and I understand that." He says, "You can call me whatever you feel comfortable in calling me." And I just called him by Sam for the longest time, but I now call him Pops. And he said he's totally fine with that. And I feel comfortable calling him Pops, but he was really cool about that. He understood about my dad. So, and I told him, I said, "And my mom doesn't want anyone to know." I said, "And I haven't said anything to my dad." And he says, "You know what?" He says, "You don't have to tell your dad if you don't want to tell your dad." He says, "I will be okay with that." He says, "I don't want to cause any problems. I don't want to come between anybody." He says, "If I need to stay a secret, I will stay a secret." He says, "Whatever you decide, I'll support." And I said, "No, I need to tell him." I said, I can't. I can't keep a secret from him, because what if he hears from someone else and then, he'll come to me, well, why haven't you ever said anything? I said, I could never do that. I didn't tell my dad right off the bat about Sam. I waited a while. I wanted to at least wait till after the wedding to tell my dad. I figure I'd be safe. And I think I had even gone on to one of the Facebook pages. My mind's drawn a blank right now. One of the MPE Facebook pages. But anyway, I went on there and I had asked for advice. If I tell my bio father, I'm scared that my actual dad will find out, if I don't tell him. And I think a few of them said, I've never told my dad, and it's been like, I don't know, many years. And so I was like, I was feeling comfortable about him not finding out in that short time, because my daughter was getting married in January. So I knew I wouldn't have to, keep it a secret for long. But I did ask I asked Sam if my brothers would be comfortable in me reaching out to them, because I would love to connect with them if they're comfortable, being involved in my life. And he said, I'll ask them. And they said, absolutely, we would love to have a sister. And so I really have a good relationship with them too. I have a better relationship. So I'm still the oldest. So it goes me, and then the older brother, and then my sister, and then the younger brother. And the older brother, I'm closer to him than the younger brother. I talk to both, but I talk more with the older brother. And the older brother texted me shortly after we started talking, and he's like, why did you reach out to us? And I remember my heart just sunk. And I was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to answer this? Because I felt like he was being like defensive. And, it was over a text, and you can always misread text. And so I didn't know how I was going to respond. I'm like, I'm just going to be truthful with him. So I just responded back and I said, family has always been important to me. I said, and your family, and I just couldn't keep you guys, like, I just couldn't keep you guys at a distance. I said, so I wanted to reach out. I said, it was probably more selfish reasons. I said, but I wanted to get to know you guys because you're my family. And I wanted to get to know my heritage. And he was like, well, I think it's cool, he says. And which really relieved me, because I was just expecting this big confrontation, but I was really relieved, because he goes, I think this is cool. He goes, I am excited about you reaching out to us, and it's not selfish at all. He goes, I'm very glad that you did it. He says, this is a good thing. And I'm like, and so that really made me feel good. Both Sam and my brothers have been very accepting and very welcoming. And it's been very overwhelming, because I'm getting everything that I had hoped for. And so, I don't know, it was just getting so overwhelming that I just felt like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done this, because I don't know, I just couldn't, my mind was just not processing as fast as it was happening. And I was feeling guilty about it. And so, and then I think I was also feeling guilty because here I have this new family that is being very accepting and very welcoming. And I did not want my current family to feel like I was leaving them behind. So I think I was feeling guilty, and on top of being ecstatic. And so it was just all very overwhelming, and trying to decipher all my emotions. But And so finally, it came time for my daughter to have her wedding. That was when I think it was Omicron virus broke out again in January of 2022. And everybody's flights were being canceled. So I had zero family out here, zero of my family out here for my daughter's wedding. And which really made us sad because, it's a very joyous day. But then at the same point or same time, we were like, there's not going to be any drama. So this, we can deal with this. So we hated not having family here, but we made the most of it, and the wedding was great. And then at the end of January, my mom had come back on her little kick that, well, I think it was shortly after the wedding, she said, hey, I'd be willing to tell your dad if you need me to. And at first I was kind of thinking, maybe I should let her because this is her, thing that she did. So maybe I should let her do it, and maybe it will help her to resolve things on her end. But then I got to thinking, I'm like, no, I don't want her involved. I don't want her involved. I just want to be able to handle this. I guess if I would have allowed her to do it, I wouldn't feel like I had been in control, and I'm a control freak. And so I don't know. For some reason, I just didn't want her involved, and I told her, I said, well, let me think about it. I said, but I think I'm okay. I said, but if I change my mind, I said, I'll let you know. And then towards the end of January, Mom starts texting us again saying, that she's grateful for our Heavenly Father and our Savior, and started going on about how she loves family and how we'll get through this. And she said, she went through her darkest time the November after November 21, that she went through her hardest, darkest time, and just going on and on and on. And I told her, and then that's when I said, Mom, you're not the victim here. I said, I don't mean that rude. I said, I'm just saying you're not the victim here. And she scolded me and shamed me. And okay, I said, you had a choice. I did not have a choice. I am suffering from your consequences, from your actions. I said, yes, you have to face your consequences. I said, but you're not the victim because you had a choice. And when I said that, I did not hear from her for like 3 weeks. It was on my birthday when she finally called me. And then the only thing I really said when she called me, she acted like nothing had happened. And she said hello. She talked forever about herself and how her day went. And I told her thank you. And then we said our goodbyes. That was really our conversation. I think I said like maybe 3 or 4 words. And what I didn't get a chance to tell her was, because she didn't really ask, and she didn't let me get a word in edgewise. But what I didn't tell her was the week before, I had reached out to my dad. And I told my dad about Sam. And bless my heart, my sister was there once again for me. And she drove out to my dad's. And when she got there, she said, I'll call you. You can tell him at that time. So she goes out there, says, Traci needs to speak with you. And they're all thinking that I have cancer or something's going on with somebody. Someone's going to, really sick, because my sister wouldn't tell him what I wanted to talk to him about. And she's like, no, you just need to talk to him. So they call me, and I'm trying to tell my dad. And of course, I'm breaking down. And he says, "What's wrong, baby girl? You know, you can tell me." And of course, I lost it at that point. And finally, I composed myself and I told him the story. And silence. Not a word was ever spoken again from my dad. And my stepmom was there, and she jumped in and she started talking to us, or talking to me. And I was on speakerphone. So I know he could hear me, and vice versa. And she says, "I think I can speak for both of us when I say that we love you. This doesn't change anything, and a piece of paper does not make you a dad. That your dad raised you, and you will always be his daughter." And of course, that relieved even more pressure from me, and I was grateful for that. And she did get a little defensive at first because she couldn't understand why we would go off and do a DNA test to begin with. And I wasn't about to tell her. Well, my sister thought that she was the NPE, because we didn't want to ruffle any more feathers than we had already had. So um, we just said we were doing it for recreational purposes. We just wanted to find out our ethnicity and, kind of figure out more of our heritage and stuff like that. And I said, and then that's when we got the results. That's when we kind of figured it out. And I said, but it was like a couple of years after those results that we didn't realize it until at that point. And so she still didn't really understand, but she was trying to be supportive. And like I said, I love both of our step parents. They have been awesome. They have been very supportive of my sister and I, have taken us on as their own. They have loved us and treated us with respect. And we just couldn't ask for our parents to be married to better people. And they each have found their soulmates, which has been absolutely fantastic. And it just makes it hard for family gatherings because we have to split our time now, but it's all good. But anyway, so as I'm talking to my dad, of course, and not one word from my dad. My stepmom did all the talking, and she was like, "Well, do you feel like he's still your dad?" And I said, "Well, yeah." And she's like, "Well, do you feel like you're still part of his family?" I said, "Well, yes, I do." I said, "But that's not." And I know she was just trying to say the right things, like everybody. "Well, he's still your dad," and until you stepped, I think until they stepped in my shoes, they don't understand. People don't understand. And they try to say the right stuff. And so, I try to be patient with that. And, I'm like, okay, they're trying. They're at least trying to help me. I try not to take offense to it or anything like that. I keep an open mind and realize they're just trying to be supportive. And she was really kind about it and loving about it. And after we said what we needed to say, and I did tell my dad, I said, "You will always be my dad." I said, that's no question. I want you to always be in my life. I said, so I hope this doesn't change anything. And so after we got finished talking and everything, my stepmom went off to work. And so it was just my sister, my dad, and I still on the speakerphone. And after my stepmom left, my dad just started talking about his farm and everything else like it's just another normal day. And that was never brought up again. And it has never been brought up again. because my stepmom had said, we will not mention this again unless you want to talk about it. It's not something that we're going to tell his siblings or his family about it. We're going to keep this under wraps. And so I was like, I will respect whatever you decide. I will respect that. I said, I just wanted you to know. And so, so my dad, he hasn't said one word about it. And then he called me like 3 days in a row because I told him, I said, I'm just angry all the time. I'm always angry. I'm either angry or crying or sad, grieving. I was experiencing all these emotions, and I said, I'm just tired. I'm emotionally drained of always being angry. I'm just so angry. And I was just angry at my mom for the fact that she had never told me this, even though she had her doubts. Even whenever after the divorce, she had a chance and she still never told me. And, I never real understand her real reasoning why she kept it a secret, but it's just bothered me for months. And he would call me like I said, like 2 or 3 days after that, right in a row, just calling to check on me and to make sure I was all right. But we never mentioned Sam or the situation at all. He was just small talk and cutting jokes and making sure I was okay. And fast forward to June of 2022, and I get a call from my half brother who says, "Oh, by the way, we want to come out to visit you and we want to meet you." And I'm like, "Awesome. Come on out. When are you coming?" So it was going to be it's going to be Sam, my brother, and his wife. So they came out in June and met them for the first time. And I don't see resemblance, but everyone I talk to, they're like, "Oh yeah, you are definitely related," and I don't know. I think I look too much like my mom, but I think if I were to see maybe baby pictures of Sam, maybe then I could make a decision, because you know how they always say the firstborn always takes on the look of the father or whatever. And so I would like to just kind of verify that, but he doesn't have any pictures or he can't find them. But I was just going to say, we met in June. Everything was great. And then I saw him again in August when we went back for August. And then wasn't telling my dad that he's involved in my life. So I finally, I think I was on Don's podcast after he met with you or had a podcast with you. And I reached out to Don just for the fun of it. I wasn't looking to be on his podcast or not. And I kind of told him our story, and he's like, "Hey, I want you on my podcast." So I think we're on his podcast, like episodes 7 and 8 or something like that. But he talked me into seeing a therapist. And so I ended up reaching out to a therapist, and she has worked wonders. So I have changed my mindset. I no longer consider myself a victim. I have totally put the past in the past. I have forgiven my mother. Like I said, although she doesn't talk to me anymore, I'm focused on myself and I'm living in the present. And I did reach out to my dad and said, "Hey, Sam wants to be a part of my life, and I'm not keeping it a secret. I'm not going to flaunt it in front of you, but he is going to be a part of my life." And like I said, nothing was ever said about that. But my stepmom, she said, she truly supports me, and Dad will never say anything. She says he still hasn't said anything to her about any of this. And so anyway, so at least I'm in a good place right now. I am healing, and I still have bad days, but I have more good days than I have bad days. And it's just been, it was a hard year. It was a very hard year, especially on my own. And I would totally recommend someone to take time off when they first find out and get therapy as soon as possible, because doing it on your own is not the right way to do it, because it was hell.
Yes.
But other than that, that's my story. Sorry I took so long.
You mentioned, Traci, you mentioned some wonderful resources. I will make sure and put them in the show description for Dawn's podcast, NPE Life, Missing Pieces.
Yes.
You spoke about Gina J. Daniels and also Richard Wenzel's website, their blog, npeguide.com. I'll also put a link to Gina's episode in there. Such great, people that are brand new, they want all the things. So recommend the websites, the podcasts, all the things that I need right now, because it is so consuming. And I have just so much empathy listening to your story. So much empathy. I have a Kleenex here. I even had to shed a few tears along with you while listening to you today. I so appreciate this. If people wanted to reach out to you, could they do that?
Yes, most definitely.
And what would be the best way to get in touch with you?
They can contact me with my email, which is TLWILK1990. So TLWilk1990 @gmail.com.
And I will put your email in the show notes as well. And Traci, thank you so much for sharing your story today. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me, and thank you for all that you do for us.
These stories are here for us to identify with. If you are an NPE and would like to share your story, email npestories@gmail.com. You do not have to give any identifying information. If you are an NPE and would like to share your story, I'd like to hear from you. Subscribe to this podcast to hear more. Come heal with us.